Now, the UN Security Council has imposed a controversial arms embargo on the country. The 15-member body has also renewed sanctions and added 2 more individuals to its sanctions list. It's part of efforts to exert more pressure on South Sudan's warring factions to resolve the conflict. Earlier, we spoke to Peter Biar Ajak, the chairperson of the South Sudan Young Leaders Forum, about what the arms embargo means for the country.
Other member states abstained from the U.S. vote because they listened to the argument that South Sudan was making, which is that this particular resolution was not going to be helpful to the peace process, and it may actually induce the rebels to now increase the activities. This is the argument that they were making. And South Sudan was also making argument of on the ground of sovereignty, that it is a sovereign state, and one of the pillars of this sovereignty is the ability to arm itself, be able to defend itself, and be able to project its authority in its entire territory. Now, when you actually look at South Sudan since its independence, South Sudan has had multiple of wars. And if you look how these wars were ended, you didn't actually see any real use of force and projection of sovereignty as what brought the ultimate outcome. It was usually negotiations and power sharing. So the notion that you need arms to be able to defend yourself here is something that is being overstretched. Because if you look at the history of conflict in South Sudan, most of it have only been resolved through people talking. And this was the time when South Sudan was arming itself and had a lot of military hardware. And even in this current war, government is saying that this is a conflict that requires a peaceful means of being resolved. It's the same thing that the rebels are saying. So really, when you look at it, there is no need for arms on both sides, since all of them agree that there is no military solution. Basically, you know, it's a very bad situation because everybody saw this thing coming. This is not the first time that his term is being extended. It was extended for the first time in 2015. Because that was the time when South Sudan was scheduled to have elections. But 2 years before that, the conflict broke out in December 2013. So in 2015, his term was extended for 3 years to 2018. And the idea is by then you will agree on a constitution, you will be able to end the conflict, repatriate the refugees, do a census, and then have elections. Do a security sector reform as well, and then have elections. But none of that has happened. And now we are back to the same situation we were in 2015, where, of course, if you don't take this measure and extend the mandate of the government, then you will have a constitutional vacuum. But at the same time, it doesn't, in the long run, and at the crust of it, it doesn't resolve the question of legitimacy. Because, yes, legally, your term is extended, but without the will and mandate of the people. So you can't, at the end of the day, stretch the argument of legitimacy. And this is the crisis that South Sudan is now entering. There is a crisis of legitimacy of the government. And we have been having these peace talks that are dragged on about forming a transitional government. And even that government itself will not really be legitimate, because it will be a government that is agreed upon by warlords and different political parties that are really advancing their own interests. And it may not be anything that represents the interests of the people of South Sudan. So instead of these 3 years, I think now is an opportunity to actually talk with the government of South Sudan to see what exactly needs to be done to have elections. Because this is the crisis that South Sudan is having. We haven't had elections since our independence. When Salva Kiir was elected in 2010, it was not for the President of the Republic of South Sudan, but for a President of the government of Southern Sudan. So when he became the President, it was because the Parliament agreed to extend it. And this thing has been happening now, 2011, then again 2015, now 2018. Now we extend it until 2021. So the question really is, what exactly needs to be done for South Sudan to have elections? And this is where we need the support of countries like China, US, and of course our neighbors here in the region.